Hello everyone. Today in this section we're going to be going through all of the different classes of fish that exist on Earth. There are many different classes which we'll see, and they have many different characteristics which we'll be talking about as we go through each class. Now our first class that we're looking at is going to be the jawless fish. And it's important to realize as we go through these classes, we're going through these classes of fish in the order in which scientists think they appeared on Earth. This is based off of the fossils that we find and based off of genetics. For example, we're going through the jawless fish first. Scientists believe that jawless fish were the first types of fish to exist in our oceans. So the living ones that we have today, there's about 80 or so species of them, and they're going to be lampreys and hagfish. And we can see in these pictures here, they sort of look like eels. In our picture to the left, we can see two lampreys attached to a fish, draining some of the nutrients out of it. Our picture to the right, we have a hagfish that's also feeding on something. So most of these are going to be parasitic. They'll attach to other fish. Also, these are going to have external fertilization. So that means when they reproduce, the eggs are going to be fertilized on the outside of the fish in the water, not on the inside of the fish. So here's another picture of a hagfish. When they feed, they often burrow into the body of dead fish or dead organisms. They burrow on the inside through one of their openings, and they eat the internal organs. Oftentimes, hagfish show up in groups, so you might see a dozen of them, for example, attacking a dead fish, going on the inside, eating their internal organs. Remember, they don't have jaws, so they have these like weird tongues on the inside that kind of break through and digest all of the internal organs of the things that they are eating. So they're really kind of creepy in my opinion, but some of you guys might not think so. Lampreys are sometimes called sea vampires due to the ability of most of them to latch on and suck out the blood and nutrients from other fish. You can see in the picture that we have of the fish down below, where you have a couple lampreys that are attached to it, one going up under even beneath its gills and getting attached underneath there. So it would be really hard for that fish to lose these guys and get them off of its body. So these can be very dangerous. They can injure other fish. When they latch on, they also produce an enzyme that prevents blood from clotting. So the fish will just keep on bleeding and not be able to clot the blood, and the lamprey will keep on feeding off of it. So we can see in the picture over to the right, the mouth of the lamprey. Remember, it doesn't have jaws, but it has all of these little like suckers and plates on the inside that it attaches with. Also a tongue on the inside that tears through and gets out some of that blood. So another one that's kind of creepy. Our next class of fish is class Chondrichthyes, and we know these as the cartilage fish because they have a skeleton that is made out of cartilage instead of bone. So some of the common ones you're familiar with are sharks, skates, and rays like stingrays, and then ratfish. We'll be looking at all of those as we go through this section. They have movable jaws, so unlike the jawless fish, they have jaws so they can eat bigger things. They don't really attach to things. They eat them whole and chew them up. Especially our sharks, we're familiar, they're probably the biggest example of organisms having jaws. Cartilage fish have internal fertilization. So unlike the jawless fish where the eggs are laid on the outside and fertilized, these types of fish actually have fertilization that happens on the inside, and the female fish will carry the young for a while or carry the eggs for a while. They also have many small tooth-like scales, as we can see in the picture over to the right. These scales look like little teeth. So that's a zoomed in picture of maybe like scales on a shark or on a stingray. They're a little bit sharp and rigid, so if you've ever felt a stingray, maybe in a zoo or something like that. If you run your hands a certain way, they feel a little bit tough, a little bit jagged. This helps the fish protect itself and also makes it streamline, easy for it to swim through the water. For the shark, it has a very smooth torpedo-shaped body. Once again, this helps it swim through the water. We have two pictures of sharks shown here. One is a whale shark over to the left, the large, wide mouth. And then the one over to the right, of course, a great white shark that a lot of us are familiar with, the big teeth. Speaking of the teeth, the mouth of a typical shark has about 6 to 20 rows of teeth that point inward. So some sharks might go through thousands of teeth in their lifetime. They might lose a tooth and then a tooth from the row behind it will get pushed on up and replace the one that's been lost. Teeth are very important to sharks, so they do not want to lose them. It would not be very useful for most sharks to be swimming around without any teeth. They need those to tear through flesh, grab onto things. Skates, they're sort of like sharks that have been flattened down like a pancake. They usually have a triangular shaped body, and they have paired wing-like fins on the side that help them move through the water. And many of them also have tails on the back. We can see in the picture in the middle this guy holding up a very big skate, so these can get pretty big. These are not just species that are going to be small. But once again, they have cartilage for their skeleton. So rays are going to be similar to skates, but they have diamond or disc-shaped bodies instead of being shaped like a triangle. Once again, though, they have paired fins. Remember, all of the organisms that we're going through in class Chondrichthyes have a cartilage skeleton, not bone. So their skeleton's much more bendable, movable. So these guys have a lot more ability to move and bend throughout the water. Our last group of cartilage fish are the ratfish. You can see two pictures of them here. They have gill slits that are covered by a flap of skin, and they also have this long rat-like tail that sort of gives them their name. You can see in the picture down below a little tail coming off of its back fin. Its caudal fin that's in the back. That rat-like tail is what really gives them their name. Also, I feel like the front of the fish looks a little ratty, has a very round face to it. These guys usually live way deep down in the ocean. Once again, they don't have a skeleton made out of bone, but it's made out of cartilage, similar to the cartilage that makes up your ears and your nose. The third class of fish that you're probably really familiar with are the bony fish, and these are called Oschthyrechthyes. So a little bit hard to pronounce, but these are the bony fish. They have skin covered by overlapping structures called scales. So these are going to be the fish that have true scales, like in this picture shown below. The gills of bony fish are housed in chambers on each side of the head, shown in this picture here. They're going to be covered by a protective covering called an operculum. This operculum covers the gill chamber. All of the bony fish are going to have it. We can see in these three pictures here, they all have this covering of the operculum that helps protect those gills that are very sensitive for filtering oxygen out of the water. We got to protect those. So they're going to have this tough bony operculum that covers it and protects those gills. We talked about the swim bladder last week. This is a little container, almost like a bag-like organ that these fish have on the inside that can become filled with gas. It makes them more buoyant, allows them to float higher up in the water if they want, or they can let gas out of that swim bladder and sink down into the water. Now, there are two types of bony fish, two groups, if you will. One is going to be the lobed fin bony fishes, and the other ones are going to be the ray-finned fishes. There's really only two types of lobed fin fishes that exist today, and these are the lungfish, which is shown in the picture to the left, the little brown guy down there, and then the coelacanth, which is shown in the picture to the right, a very ancient looking type of fish. These have fleshy fins that are supported by a series of bones. These exchange gases through both lungs and gills. Especially this lungfish, it has a great ability to live actually out of water for a little bit. So here's a few more pictures of the coelacanth. Once again, a very ancient looking fish. Scientists thought it went extinct. They found fossils of them from millions of years ago, and they didn't run into very many of these because they live way deep down in the ocean. But in 1938, they were rediscovered, and we still have these living in our oceans today. This species is hundreds of millions of years old, and scientists believe that this group of fish, the coelacanth, is actually an ancestor to the amphibians, like our frogs and salamanders. They think this because when they look back into the fossil record, they find some similarities between these fish and amphibians in their skeleton. For example, their fins are actually very muscular, so their fins are actually closer to like legs than they are to the fins of other types of fish. They have these bones that help them kind of move around. Also, when we look at the genetics of the coelacanth and compare it to the amphibians, we find that they are very similar. So we think that this might be one of the ancestors to organisms that started to walk on land a very long time ago. The lungfish, they tend to live in ponds that periodically dry up. So we tend to find these in tropical areas and in ponds in these areas that might dry up in the very, very hot conditions during different seasons. So they can actually live on land for a little bit, as we can see in the picture to the top right. Um, they're not going to be able to live on land for a really, really long time, but they will be able to move to other areas where they might find water to dive into and live in again. Or if it really dries up, they can burrow themselves way deep down into the soil where there's still some mud and kind of be in that wet area for a long period of time. So these guys are pretty resilient. They can deal with their entire water ecosystem drying up, and then they can move to another area or burrow themselves deep down into the sand and down into the mud and stay there for a while until the water returns. They can breathe air by way of their lungs, so they have lungs that they're able to use to do that. Our last group of bony fish that we're probably most familiar with are the ray-finned fishes. These are going to be types of fish that we find most commonly in our area. They have fins that are supported by long, segmented, flexible, bony elements called rays. And scientists think that these probably evolved from scales. So they just don't have one bone that makes up their fins. They have all of these little segments that you can see in this picture down below that kind of widen that fin out and hold it and support it together. Ray fin fishes are going to be reproducing by spawning, where they'll lay their eggs into soft areas, almost like nests in a pond or a river bank, and then the male will come around and release the sperm cells to fertilize those eggs. So that's going to be their reproductive behavior.